Welcome to the Silver Screen Podcast. I'm Jared Boomer.
And I'm Katie Gainey West. This is a podcast about movies and pop culture.
And today we're talking about the Bob Dylan biopic starring Timothée Chalamet, A Complete Unknown.
Wow. You better just get your hand near that crush alert button right now.
I'm surprised we didn't hit it already. Yeah,
I know. I thought about it, but I didn't want to get you unaware, you know?
We'll save it for when we talk about him in the cast. So
I can't wait.
That's a pretty good movie, though. Obviously, we'll share our thoughts a little bit later on in the episode, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty solid. So
I really liked it. Yes.
So before we get to that, though, we do have some recommendations. We're recording this in the last episode, Nosferatu, on the same day, so there's no new news items. But we do have recommendations, of course. 2024 just wrapped up, so you've got some of your top books from 2024. I have a few favorites as well, but go ahead and share yours of the ones that you really enjoyed from the past year.
Thank you. Well, if you look at my Instagram, I actually used a template from Jared's beautiful wife, Allison. Last year I did this. So I did the same kind of thing this year. I only did a top 15 this year instead of 20.
Okay.
But I ended up, my top 5 books were the ones I've mentioned most of these in different podcast episodes. But since we have, we're coming to the end of our podcast journey, I was like, I might as well remind people. So my top 5 of 2024, The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood was my number 1 book. Margot's Got Money Troubles, that'll show up later in the episode, by Ruthie Thorpe. Good Material by Dolly Alderton. Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Whoa, threw a zinger in there. And A Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan, which I think, Jared, you also read that, right? Didn't we both read that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I actually met Timothy Egan.
Book.
So
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah, exceptional book. Hard to get through. I mean, it's talking about the KKK. And I remember talking about that on the podcast because I was saying there's a lot of parallels to today. I think I talked about it. And then Good Material, I saw that book on a lot of best books of 2024 lists. And then Margot's Got Money Troubles, I'll mention that later. And then the only other thing I just finished, I binged in like a day and a half the most recent season of Queer Eye that's on Netflix. It was maybe my favorite season they've had so far. They now have Jeremiah Brent replaced Bobby, and Bobby was fine. There's some strife, I guess, between some of the cast members, but whatever. Not my problem. But I really like Jeremiah and the people they helped. The setting was in Vegas, which I never thought I would be interested in.
Okay.
But the people were amazing. The show was just the most emotionally moving season I think I've seen yet. I loved it so much.
Huh. Awesome. So
Yeah.
some of my favorite books that I read, I don't know if I have a top 5, but some of that I really enjoyed. The Women by Kristen Hanna. That was one of my favorites.
I
That
still
was a
haven't read it.
2024 release. I read Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. Really liked that one. One of my favorite books I think that I've ever read is We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. That's not a 2024 release, but I read it this year. And I really enjoyed that one. Like, that was
is that
one of my favorites. Yeah.
We Begin at the End. Hold on. I have to look. Go ahead. Sorry. Keep going.
Yes. So that one was really good. Really liked that one. And I just actually bought his new book at Barnes & Noble the other day, which I've not started yet, but he has a new one out. So excited to read that one. And then I just finished reading, which was also great, All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I think you may have read, we talked about Razor Blade Tears on here. Yeah.
Yep.
So
that
I've not
really
read
good.
that, but that was my first book I've read by him. And I really enjoyed it. And again, another like crime book. Yeah. We Begin at the End is a crime story. And Napolitano's book is kind of like a retelling of Little Women.
Yes.
And then The Women is like, I would say, historical fiction, which is what Kristen Hanna kind of does.
That's her thing.
Yeah.
Well, those 2 books, Hello Beautiful and The Women, are both on my list for this year to read.
Yeah, they were good. So, and then TV, I don't really have anything recently that I've been watching. The second season of Severance is about to start. Yes. I really enjoyed the first season, so I'm hoping the second season is good. So that'll be out soon.
I mean, I feel like they have taken 5 years to put this season out.
Yeah, it's been quite a while.
It's crazy to me how long it takes, how long we have to wait, and then we can watch, since things are only coming out in 6 or 8 episodes, we watch them in like a day and a half. And I just think this is weird. But whatever. Speaking of, though, I just finished the second season of Shrinking. and it was
Oh, okay.
great. And I love that show. So that's on Apple TV as
Yeah,
well.
that I have not gotten into that one, but I've heard
Oh,
a
I
couple
love
people say it
shrinking.
was good. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I would definitely want to check that one out too. So okay, those are recommendations, and now we'll get into A Complete Unknown, released on Christmas, rated R for language. I would say this is a very light R rating. You
For
know,
sure. I can't believe it is R. I guess I can. I
it
can.
was
But
kind of surprising though. I was in fact, I honestly thought it was like PG-13 until I looked up the rating of
yeah,
it.
I would have guessed PG-13 as well.
Yeah, but
Maybe
this
we're
is a
desensitized now.
I don't know. This is a fine one to take, like older kids too if they're interested in Bob Dylan. I feel like you need to be a little interested in Bob Dylan to kind of enjoy this movie or at least know a little
Yeah.
bit about Bob Dylan. So, but released on Christmas, 2 hours and 21 minutes. IMDb is a 7.8 out of 10. Critics 77%, audience 96%. So, audience is really enjoying this one. Domestically, it's made $42 million. Worldwide, we don't have any info on that at the box office. I don't know if it's come out worldwide yet or if they're holding it back. Sometimes they do that where it doesn't release in the entire world at once. So I'm sure it will make money worldwide, but domestically, 42 million for a couple of weeks for a Bob Dylan biopic is not bad. That'll probably make a decent amount of money by the time it's all said and done. So the synopsis for this one is in 1961, unknown 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York City with his guitar. He forges relationships with music icons of Greenwich Village on his meteoric rise, culminating in a groundbreaking performance that reverberates worldwide. And this movie ends, obviously, with Dylan going electric, which is like a big, big thing in
Mm-hmm.
music. So
Beautiful reading you just did,
thank
Jared.
you. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. So, this movie is directed by James Mangold, who you've probably at least seen some of his movies.
Yes.
He's directed Girl Interrupted, Walk the Line, another music movie. That one's about Johnny Cash. That one's also pretty good. I haven't watched it in a while, but I remember liking it when I did watch it. It's Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon. Is that who's in
Yes.
that?
That's what she
Okay.
won her Oscar for.
Okay. Nice. So 310 to Yuma, Wolverine, Logan. In 2018, he was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay for Logan, and in 2020 for Best Picture for Ford versus Ferrari, another one of my faves from that year. And then
Don't
next up,
you?
he's
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say next up, he's directing Juliet, and then another Star Wars movie.
Yes. When I was like researching for this and reading about him, don't you think that is the strangest group of strange seems to be my word today. I need to come up with a new word. Sometimes you can hear yourself say something over and over. But I just feel like he has such an eclectic group of movies, like Logan versus Walk the Line versus Girl Interrupted and Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah, those are really random.
Yeah, like it's not like he got like Robert Eggers, we just talked about when we did Nosferatu. He does like a certain kind of style or time frame of films. Some people, Yorgos Lanthimos just says, "What's crazy that seems like you're tripping on shrooms?" Like that's the movie I'm gonna do. Like some people have their thing that they do, and this he doesn't seem like he adheres to a specific time, place, or genre.
No, and he also did the Indiana Jones movie last year that came out. So that
Oh,
was
okay.
not good.
We
No.
covered that one. That we ripped that one apart. We
Yeah.
did that. Let's see. That was 196. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is that episode. If anybody wants to
Yeah,
listen to it,
that's a
we
fun
hated
episode to
it.
go listen to. Yeah, we did not like it at all. So,
We bashed that. That was the one where I laughed forever about the Sicily.
look, there it is.
Look, there it is. 1913 or whatever.
Knew the year and the place immediately after being
Yeah.
in a plane that travels through time, and they had no idea where they were going to
Absolutely.
end
How
up.
could you not? How could you not?
What are we doing? Just watch the original Indiana Jones movies. They're way better. So,
Yeah.
okay, we'll take a quick break here. We'll come back. We'll talk about Timothée Chalamet for about 30 minutes, and then the rest of this movie for A Complete Unknown. And we're back here on the Silver Screen Podcast talking about A Complete Unknown. In the lead role, playing Bob Dylan, is Timothée Chalamet.
Thank you, Jared. You might as well just go ahead and fall asleep on that crush alert button. Thanks, Jared. As we all know, next to Tom Hanks, the love of my life, is Timothée Chalamet, who plays Bob Dylan. He recently celebrated a birthday. Don't you dare think I forgot. It's the day before mine. So he's another year older. He is unfortunately still with Kylie Jenner. So if anybody was watching during the Golden Globes, they kissed a lot. They seemed really happy and in love. My heart broke, but you know what? I have to remember I'm personally happy, so I need to calm down about the two of them. I never thought this was going to last this long. I really didn't. I thought this was
Yeah, it's a very interesting
I
relationship
mean,
because I mean I know they're both celebrities, but Kylie Jenner has this like aura about her, and then
mhm.
Timothy Chalamet kind of seems more like a down to earth type guy. Like, I mean, you watch like the press for this movie, and he's just kind of like doing all kinds of random stuff, like. But he
Yeah,
seems to be very like relatable as like, oh, I would want to be
a
friends with that
human. He seems
person.
to be a
Yeah,
human. You know
yeah.
what? This might be very cutthroat, but to me, one seems cerebral and cultured and talented, and the other seems like none of those things. So maybe you can guess who I think is who, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'm shocked they're still together. But that's not what I need to focus on. I'll tell you more about Timothy's movie history here. He is best known for Call Me by Your Name, Lady Bird, Wonka, Little Women, and Dune Part 2. In 2018, he was nominated for Best Actor for Call Me by Your Name. Next up, you can see him in Marty Supreme. It's directed by one of the Safdie brothers. I think it's Benny. And I went to look just to see what that's about, and it says the plot is under wraps, so it's not going to tell us
Huh.
anything. But I think it is slated to come out this year, 2025.
Okay.
Next up, I don't need a crush alert, but you should just know I am a big, big fan of Elle Fanning. She plays Sylvie Russo in this film. I think she is one of my favorite, best dressed consistently, anytime, anywhere. I wasn't in awe of what she wore to the Golden Globes this weekend, but I just think she has such great taste. I love her. And it's weird too, because a lot of like siblings all like them together. I have never been a fan of Dakota Fanning. She drives me nuts, but I love Elle Fanning. So go figure. DM me if anybody agrees with me. That maybe it's just, again, maybe it's a me problem. But Elle Fanning is best known for Maleficent, Super 8, Somewhere, The Neon Demon, and the TV series The Great, which I have heard wonderful things about. Next up, I could not believe this, Jared. I almost screamed when I was doing my research. She is going to be in Margot's Got Money Troubles, which is going to be made into a TV series. And even before I was doing research for this, I had typed for my recommendations. That was probably my second favorite book of the year,
Okay.
this past year, 2024. But apparently, I'm not the only one. I saw it on numerous bookstagrammers and stuff, their favorite books of the year. It wasn't in the New York Times list, but I definitely saw it in a bunch of like big, pretty prominent lists this past year for best books of the year. But they're going to make it into a TV series, and the TV series is also starring Nick Offerman, Nicole Kidman, and Michelle Pfeiffer, to name a few. So
Wow, stacked cast.
yeah, that should tell you it's probably going to be good. Lastly, we have Edward Norton. He plays Pete Seeger. He is best known for Fight Club, Primal Fear, Birdman, American History X, and several Wes Anderson films. I didn't feel the need to name them all. He's been nominated for 3 acting Oscars, including 1997 for Primal Fear, in 1999 for American History X, and 2015 for Birdman. He doesn't have any upcoming projects listed. And then lastly, I did put some of our other cast members. There was a great supporting cast in this film. I do say that a lot, but there were a lot of people that I kind of like I recognized and thought, I don't remember where I knew you from. But anyway, they include Monica Barbaro, who I almost made one of our leads, Joe Tippett, Eliko Hatsune, and Scoot McNairy, and Riley Hashimoto. So great cast. And Joe Tippett, fun fact, he is engaged to Sarah Bareilles, if you're wondering.
Oh, very cool.
And he also is in The Morning Show with Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. That he plays Reese Witherspoon's brother in that show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you look up who else is in this Timothée Chalamet movie that's coming out? Did you happen
I
to look
saw
at the
people, but I
cast?
can't recall who I saw on the list.
It's very random. Gwyneth
Yeah.
Paltrow,
Okay.
Fran Drescher, Penn Jillette, Tyler the Creator,
Excuse me?
Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank.
I don't understand.
plot under wraps because they don't have one. It's just
Yeah.
we
I
got all
think
these
it's
people
done though.
together.
I
Yeah.
think they finished filming and everything because it said 2025, but
There's pictures up of like him on set,
huh.
acting in it, but
Huh.
again, no, it looks kind of like it doesn't look like it's set in present day. That's all I can say. It's like
Okay.
old-timey cars in the movie. So,
Oh.
it's
All
probably
right.
at least, it might be the 60s, the
Oh,
50s,
it's
something like
that.
that.
It's the one he's been filming that he's had the mustache for, and I've seen
Mhm.
him kissing. Yes, and I've seen him kissing Gwyneth Paltrow. I should have known that. Yeah, yeah. It's
So,
definitely old timey, and I did see somewhere. I think he's playing someone that was a real life person.
okay. I'm
I
sure we'll get
think.
more details
Yeah,
as we get closer to the release, but
yeah.
yeah, that is supposed to come out sometime this year. So,
Okay.
cool. Likes for this movie. Obviously, when you have a movie based on a real person, the person that is playing that person has to be somewhat believable in the role. And that's definitely the case here. Obviously, Timothée Chalamet is playing the most famous person in this movie, Bob Dylan. But he really did a fantastic job in this movie with his voice, with his mannerisms.
Yes.
He learned how to play guitar, or maybe he knew how to play guitar, but he's definitely playing guitar in this movie. His singing voice is great. So he really did a great, I was a little skeptical about this casting choice, but props to him for doing a really fantastic job. And also at this point in his career, doing so many different types of things too. He's got the big sci-fi movies with Dune. He's got Lady Bird, Call Me by Your Name, and now obviously this is just another thing. He's obviously been in singing movie before. He was in Wonka, but to be so multi-talented and to do this so well was really impressive, and obviously shows that he has a lot of respect for Bob Dylan too. So,
Yes, I've watched every interview I can find of Timothy Chalamet, Elle Fanning, Edward Norton talking about this movie, Monica Barbaro. The cast is outstanding. I was extremely impressed with Monica Barbaro playing Joan Baez,
hmm
and I did Edward Norton. I don't. There's something about him I've never liked, but I do think he's a good actor, and I thought he did a great job as Pete Seeger, who was equally he was he also had a big hand in folk music and just American culture as well. But this movie didn't focus as much on that. And then Elle Fanning, I'd never really seen her in anything except like bit things here and there. But I thought, to me, Timothy and Monica were the two that stood out to me by far. But Timothy, this is not even a joke. Whoever did his hair, this is a separate like for me, should get an Oscar. They because I don't look at Timothy and think there's a lot of similar features to Bob Dylan other than he's tall and thin. But I think he had a prosthetic nose or something on. He definitely, that didn't look like his nose. But his hair was outstanding. Whoever did his hair, that looked just like Bob Dylan's hair during that time. It was amazing. And the costuming and everything was brilliant. I especially noticed the makeup on Monica Barbaro too, how she looked, her and Elle Fanning, they looked so much like the 60s, like everything about those muted tones, very bare-faced, which was beautiful and so French of them. So all those things, I thought that the makeup and stuff was fantastic, the hair was fantastic, but to me, Timothy outshined so many people. You could tell how much he prepared. And you know what? If nothing else, I agree with you, Jared. He is a jack of all trades and a master of all of them. Like, I don't think he seems to excel at everything he does. But the fact that he could play guitar, sing, and harmonica is insane to me. And anyone who thinks that's easy, then he did his job because he made it look flawless. But that had to be extremely hard. And I can
hmm
play multiple instruments, but never in my life do I think I could sing and play guitar and play harmonica at the same time.
and act
Crazy.
at the same time too.
Yeah.
Like not just standing there playing, but like acting while you're doing that as well. So, another like obviously is the music for this movie. Obviously, the music is great. That's the case with Bob Dylan's music. They really hit the highlights here, and really have some really great songs and great performances in this movie. And another thing that I really enjoyed with this movie is just kind of the music, but also the discussion around the music as well, in terms of him writing the music. Him and Monica Barbaro's character have numerous conversations about like the first album he comes out with is like this album of covers, and nobody really likes it. and her character and Elle Fanning are like, these songs that you're writing are really good. You need to like release these because these are much better than these covers that you're doing. So I liked that aspect of it. I also like the music aspect of the Newport Folk Festival. And at the end of the movie, they're so scared he's going to play electric guitar. It's the '60s, but apparently, that's a big thing for the Newport Folk Festival, who's been a folk festival for so long, and it's still going today as a music festival. But they were so concerned about that, so I really like that storyline too. So a lot of music adjacent storylines in this movie. That's not just the songs and the performances.
Agreed. And even the fact that they tied in the Woody Guthrie connection and Johnny Cash, and Bobby Newirth. Bobby Newirth, I knew his name, and I knew a fair amount about Bob Dylan, and so I'd heard Bobby Newirth's name, but like even the fact that they tied in all these stories and all these connections, I don't know why it seems so weird to me that Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan would be alive and doing stuff at the same time. It seems to me like they lived in different times and they didn't. I don't know why. Um, but I thought that was a really interesting piece. I did not do any research specifically on that storyline, like how much they were really friends or are friends. Newport was interesting to me. I did not realize for part of the film, I thought they were flying to California because of Newport Beach. I didn't realize it was Rhode Island for a long time, but then I remembered I think Newport is supposed to be one of the most expensive places to live, Newport, Rhode Island. And I think Taylor Swift's the house that she has there, that mansion in Rhode Island, is near that. I think it's technically in a place called Waterley. I did look that up. Westerly, excuse me. But I think it's nearby. I mean, Rhode Island is very tiny. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
but I agree with you. I like that they tied all these musical pieces in. I like too that they even focused on the fact that to get famous, a lot of people were doing covers of other famous songs. That was really interesting to me, to the point where at first I was like, oh my gosh, look at me. I already know stuff about Bob Dylan, feeling kind of full of myself going into the movie, and then being knocked right back down to size because I kept thinking, I don't know who originally did this song, or is this a cover, or did they start it? Like there were so many questions at the end. But I think the film accomplished what it wanted to because it's introducing you to all these great music like lyrics and songs, and festivals. And then another thing about the music, Jared, so his whole relationship with Joan Baez, I kept coming upon articles because I wanted to read more about their relationship. She wrote a song called Diamonds and Rust that is like one of her most famous songs. And I don't know if you've heard the lyrics, but they say it's like very much indicative of their relationship. But the one thing I wanted to highlight, she says, you're telling me you're not nostalgic, then give me another word for it. You who are so good with words and at keeping things vague, because I need some of that vagueness now. It's all come back too clearly. Yes, I loved you dearly. And if you're offering me diamonds and rust, I've already paid. Ooh,
Oof.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did
But
not really get along. It doesn't
no,
seem
they
like so.
didn't. It was funny though. I feel like I have had a relationship like that where I kept thinking, why do I keep coming back here? Why am I here? Why are we having this conversation? So I had some PTSD from that.
The mysterious nature of Bob Dylan. So the music just drew her in, and obviously they were both musicians too. So that was a whole thing as well, that they could relate to each other on that level. But personally, they had a lot of differences between the two of them. So another like for this movie is the costume and the set design is really good. Obviously, they're dressed like the '60s. You can tell that it's the '60s, and I really appreciated like the Newport Folk Festival, the setup of that, because obviously like it's still going today, and like in the '60s, it was not as big as it is now, and so the stage and everything is like very like almost set up like you would see like at a local town Fourth of July
Yeah, like a
celebration type
fair.
thing. Yeah,
Yes, it's
yep,
exact. I was like, this is like the Indiana State Fair. It was so,
yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
looked
It was like
so, it
so
wasn't
like bare
like
bones. Yeah,
grandiose. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
agreed.
but that obviously allowed the music to shine. But I liked that as a set design, and I don't know what it really looked like during that time. Maybe that's exactly what it looked like. But
Yeah.
I thought it was done well, and then also the ability to kind of have the sides be open so that you could see when somebody was standing off stage, even when they weren't on stage. That was used well in the terms of the
Yes.
cinematography. To kind of focus on people that maybe weren't on stage at the time, but you could still see them out of like your peripheral vision. So
Agreed. Another thing that I specifically liked, just because you were talking about characters, you made me think of it with the offstage thing. I know this is partly just an acting choice, but I really enjoyed how the women reacted to things in this film, because you're never fully aware if Elle Fanning's character is aware that Bob Dylan is sleeping with Joan. You know what I mean? Like, you never, I think she does know. I think she's very bright, but she never freaks out. She never snaps at him. She never, like, she's just very even keeled, and also really good at like setting that boundary and being like, I'm done. And I thought
Hmm.
she and Joan, but both Monica and Elle, the way they portrayed those women was really impressive, and it made me respect those women rather than feel sorry for them. So I thought that was something very unique that we don't see in a lot of films. Another thing I liked that has to do with just, I tried to find some specifics because I feel like a lot of times I'm like, the cast is good, the costumes are good. Yeah. But something I specifically liked is that they focused on a set period of time. A lot of biopics, including, I know we disagree, but I really loved Bohemian Rhapsody. But a lot of times these biopics, or like the one with about Elton John, Rocket
Hmm.
Man, they will go back and forth in time. They'll do time jumps. They'll go back and they'll be like, this parent was abusive and this happened, or someone's breaking up with someone, or their cat dies, or I don't know. Like, they'll show all these dramatic events and it's their whole life, and they jump back and forth in time. And that can be really interesting, but it can be overdone. I love that this movie specifically focused on just 4 or 5 years. You didn't have to know anything before. I didn't know if Dylan got along with his parents, if he had siblings, which he does, but like, I didn't know if he was escaping his parents. I couldn't remember where he was from, which is Minnesota. There were so many questions I had, but you didn't really need to know that. He was a fully formed character when we saw him, and we saw his growth and change, and you didn't really need to know more past those 4 or 5 years that were so influential to America, to his career, and to the other people involved in his life.
I would agree. In fact, the movie's called A Complete Unknown, and that's kind of how they just drop you in, is like, here he is, and I appreciated that because sometimes in these biopics, it's like, Bob Dylan was, like you said, like, grew up here and did this and then started playing guitar. And it's like, yeah, I know who Bob Dylan, the person, is. Like, I
Right,
know what he's a musician, I don't need you to provide that information to me. And I liked that
right,
in this movie, they didn't. They assumed you had at least a general knowledge that Bob Dylan was a folk singer in the 1960s, at least coming in with that much that you knew. And
right.
then they, told you the story of kind of those years of his life. So I did really appreciate that it didn't like hold your hand through the entire movie, which some of these do. Like you mentioned Bohemian Rhapsody, even the Elton John movie does that. Like, Elton John
Yeah,
could play piano. It's like, yes, we all know that. Like,
right,
don't need to like emphasize that so much that that's a thing. So,
right.
um, another like that I had for this movie is I really liked the cinematography at certain times, especially early on in the movie. They keep the camera very close to Timothy in terms of his performances, and his
Uh-huh.
performances are pretty understated early in the movie. In fact, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie was when he was playing for Woody Guthrie right at the beginning of the movie.
Yes. Yes.
And just kind of, I really liked that setup and how it was very intimate and felt very personal. And then even when he moves on to bigger things, the camera is still pretty close to him and is still pretty intimate feel until you get to the Newport, sets at the end of the movie. Then it expands a little bit. But like when him and Joan are singing, the camera's kind of right up on them as well. I just really appreciated that. I liked that as obviously a directing choice and a cinematography choice to kind of keep it close, because again, sometimes with these music biopics, it's like big sprawling crowds and shots from all over the place, and which is appropriate at times, but I thought
Yeah.
for Bob Dylan, the way they shot it worked well. So
Yes, I those are all excellent things. I also appreciate you said a few minutes ago about how a complete unknown. I thought that was really good how you said that you kind of are dropped he's dropped into this life or whatever. I'm with you. I think that scene at the beginning, that was one of my favorite scenes too. I did really appreciate the camera work. I have a one dislike later that's not really camera work, but it
okay.
just made me think of that, but I have that in the notes. Um, and then I do think this is just piggybacking off what you were saying, I also thought they were not holding her hand, which was really nice because in high school, I did think on the way home, this was a movie I thought about for days after I saw it, but In high school, you and I had talked about the movie Harriet. We both loved Harriet. I thought that movie was astounding. We did not, or if we did learn about Harriet Tubman, we certainly didn't learn a lot about her. We did. I remember having a class, like a class period devoted to learning about Bob Dylan because they were talking about his impact on society. And he did have a profound impact. But I like that the director didn't hold our hands through this. He didn't make us feel dumb, or like we wouldn't be able to understand these things. And even if you didn't know everything about Woody Guthrie or Johnny Cash or Pete Seeger, you got enough of a glimpse to kind of know the type of person they were, who respected them, what they did for the music industry. So that, I think that's my last positive. But overall, I just really liked this film. And I'm kind of shocked, Jared. Before we go into dislikes, I'm shocked that the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is so varied from the critics one,
Hmm.
and trending in a
Yeah.
positive direction rather than the critics, when I totally thought it'd be the other way around. Oh, and I guess I thought of one other thing. Speaking of critics, Leonard Maltin, who's a very famous movie critic, who my parents I know have really liked it. He is still alive. Um, I don't know why my parents thought he might not be alive, but he is. He said this was his favorite movie of 2024. And I feel
Okay.
like for him to say that, I was kind of like, wow, because just based on Rotten Tomatoes, which should not be your only basis, but just based on that score, I was like, oh, this movie is not doing as well as they made it seem like it would. But he was saying a lot of the things we've talked about. He liked that it was like only a certain period. He liked kind of the simplicity of a lot of it. And I totally agree. I think I'm much more drawn to that. But we've talked about that in previous episodes. This is very much up my alley.
Yeah, I appreciated that it was, a simple story, but that it was one that was really interesting and had certain beats along the way to keep you interested, like when he's recording his album,
Hmm.
when he's trying to write. There's obviously the romance aspect of it where he's trying to manage his relationships with these two women. And then at the end when he's deciding, if he wants to play electric or not, there's a lot of tension there, and that obviously was a
Yeah.
big turning point in music going forward after that point. His decision to play electric at the Newport Folk Festival. Now, I will say, I thought it was a little weird that I guess he only had to play 3 songs, and that was his
Uh huh.
contract for
Yeah.
that final act. So that was interesting. And then obviously there's a part in there too about because Bob Dylan, you never know what he's going to play if you see him in concert. There's a part in there where they make note of that too, where he's like, the set list is, I create the set list and I'll play what I want to play. And
Yeah.
Joan's up there and she's like, well, you should probably play the hits because that's what people want to hear. So,
I liked also, I think this was, I know I was reading Wikipedia. I was reading a lot about Bob Dylan. I don't know if the Folks Festival was specifically supposed to be 3 songs. Like, I don't know if the contracting
okay.
was true, but it might have been true. But I did read that it was accurate that he was getting booed, and a lot of people think it was directly, like, it was after the 3 songs, and it was directly impacted by the electric guitar. Like, they were very upset about that. So they did that right in the film.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll move on to dislikes now. Not a ton for this movie. It does feel a little bit too long.
Yeah.
It is like 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I would say the back half of the movie is really probably where I would cut from a little bit
Me
because
too. Me
there's a
too.
lot. The setup is interesting, and then once you get into these performances, it just feels like it's a touch long at times in terms of
Yep.
I don't know what I would cut, but I'd probably just cut out
Oh,
maybe a
I do.
performance, maybe that year at the Newport Folk Festival where he doesn't go electric. I don't know, some things of that nature.
I know exactly. Well, I know
Okay.
some things that I would cut. I agree with you. I actually put, I think this was a touch too long, which even though I love Timothy, I'm interested in the material. This is a movie I would like. I thought, oh, I'm getting the urge to leave. Like, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm done. I get the point. They did a good job. Like, I still would have left and been like, great movie if I didn't see the end. But I one specific thing that I thought of that I put in the notes that I think they could have cut. There was a lot of noodling around on the guitar in beds, next to beds. Like
How does
I
it feel?
yeah, and I think even when he
Just like
played,
that for like 5 minutes.
yeah, and it was also like it wasn't demonstrating like, oh, Timothy can sing or Timothy can play. It was kind of just incomprehensible words, and I mean, we know the words now because we know the lyrics, but a lot of it, I was like, what's the point of this? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, we didn't really need this. Like, even when he goes, he shows up multiple times uninvited at women's doorsteps. And it's fine to show that, but I didn't need to see it 2 or 3 times. I understood after the first time that that's like his MO, that he does that. That he shows up places uninvited, that he yells outside of people's windows of their apartments to be like, come down here at a moment's notice. That he's self-absorbed to the point where he is sacrificing any sort of romantic or intimate relationship because he's too absorbed with the piano or the guitar and the lyrics and all that stuff. So I felt like there was a little too much of that. And I also thought the argument with people about the Newport Festival with Pete Seeger and with other people about whether he should stay, leave, and when he should play, I felt like that stuff lingered too much at the end. Like, I thought it was good to have a conversation with Pete Seeger because Pete was his mentor and his friend. And really, Pete was the only one that didn't frustrate him. It seemed like in the whole thing, Pete was the only person who he didn't get tired of. He rolled his eyes a
Mm-hmm.
couple times, but he respected Pete, and you could tell. But I felt like that conversation was important to highlight. I thought all the stuff with the producers and the extra guys at the record studio and stuff, I didn't need to see that. I don't think that was relevant. So anyway, that's what I would have cut. And then actually my only other dislike has to do with another thing that I was very proud, I thought of this specifically, but they could have cut this. So they mentioned, I actually wanted to know more about his Jewish heritage. One thing I didn't remember about Bob Dylan is that his last name is Zimmerman, like his given name. And he grew up like Jewish and like practicing Jewish traditions and stuff. That's interesting to me. I want to know more. It's understandable if they don't feel that that is necessary to highlight in this movie. Sure, absolutely not. But they specifically introduced the idea in the film, showed Elle Fanning looking at his notebook that said Robert Zimmerman, and then her
Yeah.
questioning it, and then he doesn't want to talk about it. And I thought, why did we show this then? Like, we already knew he was kind of reclusive, didn't want to share a lot of his personal details. I don't know why you would introduce such an interesting storyline and then be like, oh, we don't need it, just forget about it, it's not important. That could have specifically been cut. That really bothered me.
I only had one other dislike other than you.
Okay.
And I think it was when I was going into this movie, I thought that Edward Norton's character was maybe Bob Dylan's manager, or obviously he was a mentor to him, but he has a
Uh-huh.
separate character that is his manager. And I just think I would have liked some more interaction between Bob Dylan and the manager character, because it seemed like he had such a big part, obviously, in what was happening as well. And there is a little bit at the beginning, like his manager's like, hey, that's my client, even though he hasn't signed him yet,
Mm-hmm.
because he goes to that like open mic night and just hears how good he is. But I would have liked, especially with the stuff about the Newport Folk Festival and like playing electric, like they have a couple conversations about it, but I would have liked like maybe a half of a scene where it's like him and his manager being like, hey, what do you think? Is this Bob Dylan maybe saying, is this good for my career? Is this, what should I,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like he's confiding in his manager at all, which is kind of weird because that person is also like very close to you if you're a musician. So,
Right. And it's understanding he doesn't want to do that with everybody else, even the women in his life. But I agree with you. Like, that seemed to be the one person that him and Woody
mhm.
Guthrie seemed to have a hold on Bob, and nobody else could. And so I agree with you. It felt like that connection didn't really go anywhere. You could tell there was a mutual respect, but that was about it.
Yeah, yeah, it didn't seem
Agreed.
like it was, and maybe that's how he was with his manager in real life.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I would have liked a little. Usually, the manager character in a music biopic has a bigger role
Yeah.
than the manager did in this
And
movie.
I
So,
think I think ultimately the movie was so interesting. Bob Dylan and the people around him at that time, everybody is so interesting. It left me wanting to know more. And I had a lot of questions. I think it's good. It made me go home and research more about these people because I was
mhm.
intrigued. But that was one deficit, I think, was that they introduced a lot of ideas and people and relationships and then didn't really fully close that story.
I also think this isn't really a dislike, but it's just a comment. I think it's interesting that obviously Bob Dylan is still alive,
Hmm.
but has not commented on this movie at all. Timothée
Right.
Chalamet has not mentioned if he had a conversation with Bob Dylan or met with him at all before this movie
Oh, he
started. Okay.
did.
Okay.
I only know that one thing. He specifically said he never talked to Bob Dylan, but Bob did write something on either X or something where he said he heard
Bob Dylan on
Timothy was
X.
gonna. Yeah, I don't know if it was X. I know it was a social media platform.
Okay.
He released a statement and he said something about like Timothy was a good choice, or I'm sure he's gonna do a good job. He alluded to like he's
Okay.
talented, he'll do a good job. But yeah, he never met Bob Dylan or anything, which I also think is super strange. It's very in line with like how Bob Dylan is, but so strange. I also think it's interesting. I know he famously or infamously did not go to accept his Nobel Peace Prize. But it's weird to me that he goes to some things. Like he did go when Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He went
Mm-hmm.
to that. So it's
Yeah. Yep.
interesting to me what he chooses to do and not do. Also, when I did more research on Bob Dylan, I couldn't remember if he had children. He has five.
Okay.
I think four of which are biological. I'm pretty sure four or five are biological. I know he adopted someone as well. So, anyway, very interesting. But the man has had an interesting life.
Yeah, that is for sure. So, and I feel like Timothée Chalamet portrayed that pretty well in the movie in terms of him
Yeah,
being just kind of a curmudgeon, which he's kind of been his entire
definitely.
life.
He
So,
is he is for sure a curmudgeon. That's a perfect word for it.
so let's go ahead and give our scores. I know I went first last time. So, what are you
Yes.
going to score a complete unknown?
I'm going to go ahead and give this 86.
Okay.
To me, I really liked this film. To me, that is a high score. I mean, maybe that's too high. I don't know. I think it's not my favorite film of the year, but it's pretty close to one of my favorites. There's a lot I liked about it. I don't think it's a perfect film, which is why I'm not really putting it in the 90s. I feel like 90 for me these days is like nearly perfect, flawless, no notes. But I was very impressed with this. This is definitely my genre, a genre I really like. I'm obviously obsessed with Timothy, but I thought everybody did a really good job. And it's an interesting topic. So well done.
I think I'm real close to you. I'm going to go 85, so just a point
Ooh,
lower than you.
perfect.
I think if I don't know, Bob Dylan, I know obviously of him, but I've never listened to his music a ton or researched a lot about him. I think if this was a movie about a different person in music that maybe I had known more of their music or related
Hmm.
to more, I probably would rank it in the 90s because it's very well made. It's just my interest in Bob Dylan doesn't get it to that point where it's like one of my, favorite movies I've ever seen or one of my favorite music movies. But it's very, very good, very
Yeah.
well made. And Timothy obviously does a fantastic job as Bob Dylan. So, and obviously I'm not going to, knock it points just because of the subject matter. They made it about Bob
Right.
Dylan. It's just that me personally, I don't have a huge connection to Bob Dylan in terms of his music. But I still really enjoyed the movie, and I learned things about Bob Dylan. So
Me
got
too.
to give it
I
credit for
would,
that. So
if they ever had like an alumni class where you could just learn for a semester about Bob Dylan's lyrics when he wrote this music and what they mean, I would love that. Because I know a lot of his lyrics were very much of the time. Like
mhm.
something, an event was happening. Like I think they were alluding to the Cuban Missile Crisis and some other things in the film. And I know he wrote stuff as a reaction to like Bobby Kennedy's death and JFK's death and stuff like that. I would love to know what the lyrics mean and really study what he wrote and when he wrote it. But yeah, I was already interested in Bob Dylan. This taught me a lot. But I this is one of my favorite films I've seen from the 2024 year. You'll definitely see this in my top 10.
Yeah, this was really good. So that's our thoughts on A Complete Unknown. Be sure to follow us on social media at Podcast Silver on Instagram, search us on Facebook, and then we're also on Letterboxd too. We'll put our links for that in the description for the show, so you can click on there if you want to follow Katie or I on Letterboxd. And then on our next episode, we're going to have kind of a dual thing going on. We've got our favorite movies of 2024. And we've got the Oscar nominations, which will be out very soon. So we will be covering both those things on our next episode. It's just a few months until the Oscars, not long at all. They're later again. They're in
Yeah,
March.
March 2nd.
Yeah, hosted by Conan this year. So excited
Mhm.
about that. But I think this is kind of we talked about it on the last episode. It seems like there's no clear front runner in this year's Oscar race in terms of a movie that's just going to win everything. So that'll be
Yeah,
interesting to see what gets nominated, and then also obviously a couple months later what wins. So we'll be talking
agreed.
about
I'm
that on our next episode. It should be fun.
Until next time, we'd like to thank the Academy.